Most people remember the Korean War as a series of frozen battles and shifting lines, but they miss a quieter truth that mattered just as much as terrain or firepower. For thousands of soldiers, survival hinged on heat, small, unreliable, improvised heat, and the failure of modern equipment to provide it. The war exposed a blind spot in post-World War II military thinking, that industrial logistics and standardized gear could replace adaptability. In Korea's winters, that assumption broke down fast. If you value this kind of overlooked military history and the lessons it carries forward, subscribe to Echoes of Valor now, because this channel exists precisely to examine what doctrine and official narratives tend to skip. What emerged from that failure was not a new piece of issued technology, but a crude, nearly forgotten object, a stove made from a tin lid or ration can scrap. It had no moving parts, no pressurized fuel system, no warranty, and no formal place in military manuals. Yet, under conditions that defeated modern camp stoves then, and often still do today, it worked. To understand why requires stepping away from battles and into the daily mechanics of endurance during the Korean War. The Korean War punished assumptions that had survived World War II unchallenged. American forces entered Korea in 1950, equipped with confidence shaped by recent victory. Logistics planners believed that cold-weather gear, fuel supplies, and field kitchens would function as designed. Portable stoves issued to troops relied on pressurized liquid fuel systems that became temperamental in extreme cold. Seals shrank, pumps stiffened, and ignition became unreliable. Even when fuel was available, lighting a stove could require more dexterity than frozen hands could provide. Soldiers needed hot food and melted snow for water, not theoretical efficiency ratings. This environment forced a return to improvisation, not because soldiers lacked training, but because doctrine had underestimated climate as a decisive factor. In that gap between expectation and reality, the tin lid stove appeared. The tin lid stove was not issued, approved, or standardized, which is exactly why it worked. The stove itself was simple to the point of absurdity. Made from a discarded ration can lid or flattened tin, it was shaped into a shallow burner, often with small punched holes or folded edges. Fuel varied: gasoline, diesel, kerosene, or even scavenged lubricants. There was no pressure, no pump, and nothing to freeze except the fuel itself, which could be warmed by body heat. Its brilliance lay in its indifference to precision. It did not require exact tolerances or clean fuel. If it burned, it functioned. If it smoked, soldiers adjusted it by bending metal with numb fingers. The stove could be rebuilt in minutes using trash from the supply chain itself. When it failed safely and predictably. Modern camp stoves, then and now, often outperform improvised designs under ideal conditions. But Korea was not an ideal environment. Reliability mattered more than efficiency, and redundancy mattered more than elegance. Cold weather warfare really exposes just how fragile so-called modern solutions can be. The Korean War, it forced the US military to relearn lessons that were last understood in earlier conflicts. Technology that works in controlled testing environments can honestly fail catastrophically when it's exposed to extreme cold, poor maintenance conditions, and exhausted users. The tin lid stove demanded no instruction manual and no spare parts. Soldiers learned quickly that simplicity had survival value. A stove that burned inefficiently but always lit was superior to one that promised efficiency but often failed. This lesson extended beyond cooking. Weapons, lubrication, vehicle engines, radios, and even medical supplies all suffered from overconfidence in industrial solutions. The contrast between issued stoves and improvised ones became a quiet indictment of procurement culture. The problem was not incompetence but institutional inertia. Designs optimized for peacetime assumptions had not been stress-tested against the worst-case realities Korea delivered. Improvised stoves shaped survival habits that doctrine would later formalize. After Korea, cold weather testing became more rigorous. Equipment designers placed greater emphasis on simplicity, field repairability, and performance degradation rather than outright failure. Survival training began to emphasize improvisation as a skill rather than a last resort. Soldiers were taught not just how to use issued gear, but how to replace it when it failed. The Korean War demonstrated that adaptability could not be retrofitted under fire. It had to be cultivated beforehand. Civilian survival culture later absorbed these lessons, often unknowingly. Many modern bushcraft techniques echo the logic of the tin-lid stove: minimalism, local materials, and tolerance for imperfect conditions. Yet the origin of these ideas lies not in outdoor recreation, but in soldiers trying to stay alive in sub-zero nights. The stove's real value was psychological as much as practical. After Korea, cold weather testing became more rigorous. Equipment designers placed greater emphasis on simplicity, field repairability, and performance degradation rather than outright failure. Survival training began to emphasize improvisation as a skill rather than a last resort. Soldiers were taught not just how to use issued gear, but how to replace it when it failed. The Korean War demonstrated that adaptability could not be retrofitted under fire. It had to be cultivated beforehand. The Korean War demonstrated that adaptability could not be retrofitted under fire. It had to be cultivated beforehand. Civilian survival culture later absorbed these lessons, often unknowingly. Many modern bushcraft techniques echo the logic of the tin-lid stove: minimalism, local materials, and tolerance for imperfect conditions. The stove's real value was psychological as much as practical. Heat does more than warm hands. It restores morale, sharpens thinking, and preserves discipline. In Korea, the ability to heat food or melt snow without fighting malfunctioning equipment gave soldiers a sense of control in an environment that stripped it away daily. This mattered operationally. Exhausted troops make mistakes. Cold degrades judgment and increases casualty rates even without enemy action. Small improvements in daily comfort translated into sustained combat effectiveness. The tin-lid stove became a quiet anchor of routine. Lighting it meant a hot drink, a brief pause, and a reminder that survival was still manageable. These moments rarely appear in after-action reports, but they shaped outcomes all the same. Modern outdoor gear marketing often ignores the lessons Korea made unavoidable. Today's camp stoves are marvels of engineering optimized for weight, efficiency, and convenience, but, many still struggle in extreme cold, especially when users lack experience or backup options. Electronic ignitions fail, fuel canisters lose pressure, and specialized parts become liabilities rather than assets. The tin-lid stove has none of these weaknesses. It is not elegant, but it is resilient. That distinction is often lost in modern discussions of preparedness, which, tend to favor specifications over adaptability. For survivalists and historians alike, this comparison is not about nostalgia. It's really about understanding failure modes. The Korean War reminds us that systems break where assumptions go unexamined. Remembering small improvised solutions helps correct how we remember wars. Large-scale narratives focus on strategy, diplomacy, and firepower, but wars are endured at ground level through countless small decisions. The tin-lid stove represents the kind of adaptation that keeps people alive, long enough for strategy to matter. Ignoring these details flattens history. It turns complex human endurance into abstract movements on a map. Large-scale narratives focus on strategy, diplomacy, and firepower. But, wars are endured at ground level through countless small decisions. The tin-lid stove represents the kind of adaptation that keeps people alive long enough for strategy to matter. Ignoring these details flattens history. It turns complex human endurance into abstract movements on a map. By paying attention to the mundane tools of survival, we gain a clearer understanding of how wars are actually fought and sustained. The Korean War deserves this kind of attention precisely because it sits in historical shadow. Its lessons were learned quietly and honestly, often forgotten just as quietly. Understanding why a crude stove outperformed modern designs is not about rejecting progress. It's about respecting reality. Progress that cannot endure hardship is not progress at all. If you found value in this deeper look at overlooked military history, subscribe to Echoes of Valor and share this video with others who care about serious, grounded analysis. These stories matter because they remind us that survival is rarely about having the best tools, only the ones that still work when everything else stops.